Hey everyone, I'm Casey,
I'm Cassandra.
and this is the first episode of our podcast, Love and Murder. This is a podcast about true crime, and in this episode, we're going to talk about who we are as individuals and what you have to look forward to in this podcast going forward. So, one of the ideas for the podcast, Cassandra, you had was crime over the decades.
Yeah, so just talking about when crime and serial killing and all of that started and how it's kind of changed over the decades and what it's like now.
So where do you think we'll start with that? Like what decade?
I don't know. I've been looking, and the one that I got hung up on as I was doing a little bit of research about it was like Old West, and there was a case on the Kentucky Cannibal, and that was in 1853. I just got hung up on it and didn't really go any further than that, so I'm hoping I can find something before that. I mean, crime's been around since the beginning of time, I feel like.
Yeah, so kind of the cowboy days.
Yeah.
Tombstone and White Earp and the gang going around trying to catch bad guys.
I still have yet to see that movie, by the way.
You've never seen Tombstone?
Never.
Huh.
I don't watch movies that are older than me.
This is true. That's a very valid point. I know when I was a kid, I watched Tombstone religiously because of my mom. However, as an adult, I've watched probably the first half of Tombstone at least 4 times, and then I'll fall asleep.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So, I don't know, it'd be kind of cool if we could go back a little bit further. Not like crazy far, but at least some record. Maybe we could go back to, before America as we know it was founded, back into England.
Yeah. Like pre-civilization.
Pre-civilization.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, like, that is, like, the one thing that has been around for forever. What is it? You always, like, talk about that Sparta movie.
Sparta.
And that was, like, pre-civilization.
That wasn't pre-civilization. I mean, that was still recorded. Pre-civilization would be, like...
Old. That's what I mean. Like you, old.
Alright, so... You're talking about before civilization. Again, Neanderthals were like, I don't know, I think like 30,000 years ago. America's only been founded for 300 years. I was talking about like going back to England before we came over here.
See, I was talking about Neanderthals.
You were talking about Neanderthals?
Yeah.
I don't think we have any recorded history that far.
What are they called? Not calligraphy. What are they called?
Like the...
Hologram. What are those called?
Alright, so neither one of us have any idea what we're talking about. We had to stop that for a second and look up the word that we were thinking of. So what's the word, Cassandra?
Hieroglyphics.
Hieroglyphics, not holographics.
That's what I was talking about. So if you want to start with like back in England, we can start there. And I won't go any further back than that. But if I find a really cool case on some cave paintings, I'm rolling with it.
All right, we'll go off your case of cave paintings. I'm going to throw it out there. I don't think that we're going to have recorded history 30,000 years ago. I definitely think 300, maybe. That's quite a year gap. 3,000 to 300.
Well, we'll see. I accept the challenge.
Well, let's see what you find. But this kind of sets the tone for who we are. You're smart enough to look something up, and I speak banjo. So.
Well, I would like to know what really jump-started your like fascination or love for true crime and all things crime.
Definitely going back to being a kid. My dad funny. He worked third shift. He watched, what's that TV show? Forensic Files. He watched Forensic Files to go to bed when it was daytime. So what did I do? I watched Forensic Files as like a 5-year-old and learn about DNA and fingerprints and all the cool forensic stuff that goes into crime scenes. And then my dad was super into like the 80s horror flicks, and we would go to haunted houses and just do random stuff. And my dad, like, even before social media, early 2000s and in the 90s, he would make jokes about like, oh, well, I've watched enough Forensic Files. I know how people can get away with stuff, and just like random jokes. What about you? What jump started you into true crime?
Well, I've always been a thrill seeker, and so I would always try to find the scariest movies I could, even as like a young kid. But I was always cautious about it, so I'd make my little sister watch them with me, and she despised me for it. But on the true crime side, my mom would always watch Snapped, The First 48, even Cops, really, just learning about, like you said, DNA and fingerprinting and the process, and just kind of it turned into a game of figuring out like what was the wrong thing done that got them caught. And similar to you, the whole Forensic Files. Quick question: do you now use Forensic Files to go to bed?
That or like Andy Griffith.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So Forensic Files. Like, I learned that. That has been like drilled into my head. He has the most relaxing voice.
That I don't know if that's scary or not. We're listening to you were listening to a guy talk about murder and crime to go to bed.
I guess that really does say something about me.
That also says a lot to anyone listening to this going to bed. So we're just kidding. We enjoy everyone listening to this. It doesn't make you weird listening to a true crime podcast or Forensic Files going to bed. It just means that you're cool like we are. So
alright, so now we got that out of the way. The people get iffy about the term favorite serial killer, but we'll use the term fascinating. So who fascinates you the most when it comes to prolific serial killers?
Prolific serial killers, I'm definitely going to say Charles Manson. I don't know. Growing up, my dad talked about him a lot. Just about how, like, I don't want to say that he committed the perfect crime, because there is no perfect crime. Like, obviously he got caught, but he never had to get his hands dirty. Everyone else done his bidding for him. So I don't know, it was a very very fucked up individual, but he was a very smart individual. So to me, again, he was a very fascinating individual. And then, once YouTube became a thing, once social media started getting big, I was in high school. Once those websites like really got big, video of Charles Manson being in prison came out. And I remember one of the first ones I watched, he's like sitting at a table. And you figure, however many years, when did he get caught? Like in the 60s, I think? Either the 60s or the 70s?
Hold on one second. It says July 31st, 1967.
Okay, so 67. And I mean, I was in high school in the early 2000s, so that's what, 40 years or so? 40 years, give or take, being in prison. You'd figure he'd be, I don't want to say depressed, but not his normal self. And if you look at, pictures and stuff that they have of him first going into prison in the early 2000s, old buddy never changed. He just kind of same crazy son of a bitch he always was.
I think that he kind of used that too. He definitely, he knew that everybody knew who he was, but he had a reputation to uphold, and I think he upheld it. I mean, stories that I hear. So my uncle was in prison with Charles Manson, and the stories just don't disappoint. Like, he played every bit of the role that he portrayed.
So you definitely think he showboated it a little bit?
I don't think he showboated it. I think that he was insane, without a doubt. But I think that he felt as though he had a reputation to upkeep, and I definitely think that he knew that it was either get killed in prison for the things that he did, or scare enough people to where nobody wanted to mess with him at all.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, especially not having all of his followers. We watched, what was that, Manson or whatever it was.
The Girls or something, which is something I do want to touch on. I would like to do reviews that are based on true events, and I would like to review those movies and kind of break it down. That was a really good movie, and it portrayed, it wasn't as much about Manson and more so about the mindset of his followers, which I liked, that it wasn't just Manson, that it was about everyone he affected, not only his victims, but his cult. And so I thought that was definitely an eye-opening movie.
We'll definitely have to rewatch that because I 100% fell asleep for that. So,
I really thought that was a marriage bonding time.
Oh, well, you said it earlier. I fall asleep, so I'm old. Yeah, Charles Manson for me is definitely the serial killer that intrigues me the most, just because of his personality. Definitely captivating, I guess. If like he was a very captivating person. He kind of pulled you in and made you feel important. But saying back to you, who do you feel is who intrigues you the most, serial killer wise?
It used to be Ted Bundy, and Ted Bundy is the most terrifying to me, but the most fascinating and one that I could just continuously do research on is definitely Willie Picton. Yeah, when I first heard about him, I was like, this is too exaggerated and not real, if that makes any sense. You listen to it and you're just like, when you watch movies and you're like, they really didn't have to do all of that. Listening to that, I was just like, and then you dive into the research and you hear about it, and it's just terrifying. And they just kept getting away with it. So,
the good old boy system.
I really don't think it was the good old boy system, though. I'll definitely have to cover Willie Picton, but it was more so the outcast. For lack of better terms, he was the smelly kid in class that nobody wanted to play with, and that followed him into adult life.
Well, I'll definitely be interested to hear about that in a future episode. What about, you mentioned Ted Bundy being the most terrifying for you. What makes Ted Bundy the most terrifying for you?
Well, one, he's extremely intelligent. I mean, he could bend and do whatever it took to fit the narrative that he wanted his life to go. And from representing himself, becoming a lawyer, he knew the ins and outs of law. Con artist. I mean, he just had the face of someone that you could trust and you could help, and he could play that part. And then escaping jail twice, being on the run, and just, again, there were so many times that he should have been caught and didn't. He was bold enough to use his real name.
He used his real name the entire time?
Oh, the entire time. He never had, like, an alias. He never had a fake name. Like, that's... Yeah, he... Like, when people were to ask him, like, well, tell us about this guy. Well, he said his name was Ted. Ted Bundy. So, interesting fact that I had recently learned is that he wanted to retire from that after he had proved his point or whatever he did, but he unfortunately had messed up, used his name, and there was no retiring from that. There was no going on to live a normal life after he had committed the crimes that he had committed, and just living happily ever after. That was it for him. But also, I had started getting into the whole serial killer thing in high school, where I was like really doing the research and really looking into it. And the girls that he had targeted, that I had fit a lot of those boxes that he had checked off. And so to me, it was like, would I have fell for it? Would I have been a victim, or would I have known better? But just like looking the way his victims looked and then resembling that was terrifying.
You know, watching that Bundy movie on Hulu, more so you watching it and me falling asleep.
Per usual.
Yeah. Definitely could see why he was successful. He just looked like a normal dude.
He's very charming too.
Yeah, he definitely, he didn't look like a bum. He looked successful. He looked like, he knew what he was doing. And had it going on. As far as you falling for it, I feel like there's no in between with you. Either you would be like, nah, dude, I'm good, not getting in that Volkswagen, or you'd be like, oh, there's not a door handle in here, let me go ahead and hop in.
Well, you say it one too many times. I am not the most observant person. I probably would have made it 10 miles down the road and I've been like, no door handle, that's bizarre.
And I'm not sitting in a seat. So.
Yeah, true. So I've covered my most fascinating and most terrifying. You have mentioned it a couple times to me, but who terrifies you the most when it comes to past serial killers?
I found this out recently, but Richard Ramirez, I don't know, that has been, again, normally fall asleep during these things, and you were snoozing, you were out, and I think it was a podcast we were listening to, and some of the stuff they were talking about, I was just like, what the hell? I would get killed by this guy, and there would be nothing I could do about it. That's truly what terrifies me. I think there was a neighbor, or maybe he attacked a couple, and one of the parties of the couple survived, or maybe they both did and they recounted. But he, again, the whole like night stalker thing, he would stalk, find the perfect opportunity. And I think in this exact one, they had like, a security system for back in the 80s or whatever, decent neighborhood. He got past all of that, went into the house, started to attack them, and they managed to fight him off. But that's terrifying. I'm one for being situationally prepared, and how do you prepare for being asleep? As well as I do, I sleep pretty heavy.
Yeah, except that one time.
Yeah, that one time. We won't talk about that. But I don't know. I mean, how do you prepare for something like that? Somebody that's, you know, watching you creating that perfect circumstance to attack you, and then doing so. That's what terrifies me. And I guess, with the whole Ted Bundy thing, I'm not getting in anyone's car. I don't know, like 15 years ago, I hitchhiked with like an old man. But other than that, that's not something that I'm gonna do. So I don't really understand. Also, not a female, so that's not something that I can relate to. But as far as Richard Ramirez, we we fit the bill. So could definitely be a victim of that. And yeah, that aspect of not being able to defend myself, I guess that's terrifying for me. So
I get that. And something that is widely talked about, but something I had learned back in my criminal justice classes was that people like Richard Ramirez and people who just walk into homes in the middle of the night, they have no idea what they're going to walk into. They can prepare all they want to, but they don't know like the training. They don't know what's going on inside that home, and they just risk it every time, and that's absolutely terrifying.
I agree. The lack of care for themselves or the situation in general, that it's mind-boggling. Just committing a home invasion or home robbery, really any crime. I'm really not trying to bide my time in prison for the right thing, maybe, but not for some dumb crap like that. So we've talked about most terrifying serial killer, and we've talked about not necessarily our favorite, but most intriguing. And today is Halloween, so happy Halloween to everyone listening, or when you hear this, it'll be after Halloween. So
shout out, Mom. I know you're living your best life tonight.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Oh, that's Jeepers Creepers.
Jeepers Creepers.
We were just talking about that earlier, and that's got to be it.
All right, what's my favorite scary movie?
I'm gonna go ahead and say Friday the 13th.
Yeah, tattoo and all. So
committed. Very
committed. We've done surface introductions, and just talking, gauging our personalities. We're here to talk about true crime and how we're going to go forward with the podcast. Personally, I think, from what we've talked about, I think that I don't want to say that we're going to have different series, but like Crime Over the Decade will be one episode, and then maybe we'll have like a more modern topic, or maybe one episode we'll have like a forensics topic, and mix in a little bit of today's news, like what's going on in Russia, or again, today being Halloween. Random stuff like that. That's what you could expect from this podcast, coming from me anyway.
I agree. And you were saying something about, we were talking about the first case, and you have something interesting in store for us based in our home state from not too long ago.
I do. I'm pretty excited to see your reaction. So I want to cover Eric Rudolph, and being from Western North Carolina, that was very real for me, because all of that, not all of that, he bounced around, but where he was hiding, that was 20 minutes away. So that, again, that was very real. Growing up, I remember there was this one haunted house that my dad and I went to, and they had a board, and it was like Eric Rudolph hide and seek, and every year that he was a fugitive, it was just another tally. And watching that tally grow, again, I was a kid at that point, so I didn't necessarily understand that, but it was very real. It wasn't just some guy on the news. That was real life. That was not necessarily our next door neighbor, but he was anywhere. No one really knew where he was. But I definitely think that your reaction is going to be fun. And I think just going over that case, I would say as an adult, that's what drew me into crime, because I wasn't really into forensic files or anything like that. And my dad had a book on Eric Rudolph, and I picked it up and just started reading it one day. And I was like, holy shit, this guy, that's insane. And I think as an adult, that's truly what sparked the interest of, looking into cases, not necessarily the true crime aspect, but, digging in and learning the ins and outs of each individual crime.
I'm excited. I know that over the past few years, you've kind of touched on it a little bit, and we all know that I sometimes have the attention span of a squirrel, so it'll all be new to me. So I'm pretty excited to hear about that, and that wasn't something that I really learned about or heard about or remember my parents talking about when it was going down. So it's all new to me. And so I think it'll be a really good episode. And you were very passionate about this episode. I do know that.
Yeah. You were kind of on the other side of the country, I think, when that was going on.
What was the year?
I wanted to say it was like 94. That's when he started all of his stuff. But 94, 96, either way, I feel like that might not have been as relevant to you, because when all of that was happening, you guys, you weren't living here, you were back there.
Yeah, we were fresh off the plane around that time.
Yeah. So I don't know, it'll definitely be interesting. I know we've rambled a lot in this episode.
We're just kind of giving a feel for what we want to cover, what we're about, and give you guys like the most real aspect of who we are as people and how we interact together and moving forward.
Yeah. I think in this episode we've covered a whole lot of personal topics, so that definitely gives a insight to who we are. This is a good time to wrap up the episode. We aren't 100% sure where all we're going to upload this to, so if there is a place to comment, if you would like to hear us talk about anything or a subject that you want us to bring up, definitely do that. We'd love to hear feedback. You could email us, if people do that anymore, at loveandmurderpodcast22@gmail.com.
Or follow us on Instagram at loveandmurder.podcast.
And I feel like that's it for this episode. We've definitely rambled a whole bunch. So hopefully that doesn't deter anybody from coming back and listening again, because future episodes will definitely be less rambling and more true crime.
And maybe a little bit less awkward. I hope, anyway.
I doubt that. But this is it. So, bye.
Bye.